Thank you very much, and thank you for affording us this opportunity to share with you. Yes, we are followers of Sister Julie's group. She's our guru, and I know she's been here for the last 2 weeks, and she's asked us to take this session on practicing nonviolence in couple relationships. You know, we say very often the family is the cradle of society, and we've said it so often. The family is the cradle of society, but leading that family is always a couple. It's always two people in a relationship. And it's amazing how subtle it is for violence to enter into a relationship. So just before we start our talk, and for the benefit of those who did not hear Sister Julie's first 2 talks, as well as for those of us who are here for the first time, I'd just like to give again the definition of violence that we would like to use. Violence is any physical, emotional, verbal, institutional, or spiritual behavior, attitude, policy, or condition that diminishes or destroys ourselves or others. Violence crosses boundaries without permission. It disrupts authentic relationships, and it separates us from other beings. Violence is often motivated by fear. It is unrestrained anger or greed. It increases domination of power over others. And violence often provokes new violence. And this spiral of retaliatory violence is often propelled by social or personal scripts, things that we decide that are enacted in situations of violence. So, when we talk about violence, there is so much more to it than just physically abuse. And, we read in the papers, and by the time violence reaches the media, it is ultimate violent behavior that is so easy to recognize. But this evening, we would like to talk to you about how subtly violence enters a relationship. And before I hand over to Hillary, I would just like you to think about the term fear and love are contradictory terms. Fear and love are contradictory terms. Fear and love cannot live in the same house.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you everyone for inviting us here to speak. Closer. All right. And so we've been reading on and seeing on television a lot of violence, especially as we're speaking about couple violence. A lot of couple violence turns up in the newspapers. And all of that violence starts from internal. Violence is never starting external. All violence starts internally. And basically, internally, very often, we are at odds with each other. We are violent with each other ourselves. We are not at peace internally. And therefore, you cannot practice non-violence externally unless you are at peace internally. And many of us are divided inside. Very often, we are fighting with ourselves, trying to look for external gratification. For us to find peace, peace is an internal, and we've just been listening and praying and feeling peaceful inside. But very often, the world tells us that for you to get peace, you have to get external gratification. So if you just get that Samsung 7 or that iPhone 6, you'll get peace. Or if they just recognize you more at work, you'll get peace. If people just see your worth, you'll be at peace. But all of those are external gratifications, and they really do not bring peace. Peace is an internal thing. And when we speak about violence, and we see and we find all of this violence taking place, the first place we have to look at is ourselves. Where did this violence start? It starts internally. And modern man, modern woman is beset by internal violence. One of the good things about coming here and praying, and hopefully you find a sense of internal peace. You come to accept yourself for who you are. You come to accept your younger, truer self. You are allowed to drop your masks, and you can be who you are. And that's a big step. So that before we can begin to exhibit external nonviolence, we have to exhibit internal nonviolence. So, if we are violent inside, if we are not settled, if we are fighting with ourselves, if we are trying to find a relationship between who we pretend to be, what self-worth we are looking for externally, and who we truly are and who God made us, then we are at odds with each other. And that violence exhibits, first of all, itself in feelings, in emotions. So during the day, as we go through the day, you find that we fluctuate between happy feelings and negative feelings. I like to give it colors. So I like to say that all good feelings or positive feelings, we can give it the color of green. And then all of those negative feelings, we can give it the color of red. So as we go through the day, we are constantly fluctuating between green and red. Sometimes we're in the green zone. We're feeling happy. And tonight, I'm feeling in the green zone. I'm feeling joyful. I'm rejoicing. And I'm feeling good. But then, at an instant, someone says something to you, and you can move from that green zone into a red zone. You can feel anxious, you can feel stress, you can feel worried, you can feel upset. So therefore, my phone is off, but if I got a phone call, and the phone call has a negative thing about my family, I can easily move from positive feelings of joy and happiness and peace into negative feelings. So every part of as we go through the day, we have to be constantly aware of ourselves. For us to practice nonviolence, we have to be consciously aware as we go through the day. Am I moving into the red zone? Am I in the green zone? Am I being able to control myself, or am I getting out of control? So I got this story. This story was told by this lady, a friend, one of our training sessions. And she said, Coach, that makes a lot of sense. Because I remember just the other day, I told my husband, we live alone, the children are gone, it's at what you call an empty nest. And violence could be at any stage of a couple relationship, young, middle-aged, old. And I told him, well, when you come home, you wash the dishes, you clean the gallery, and when I come home, I will cook the food, and then we'll have a dinner. So as she starts to reach home, late in the evening, 6 o'clock, her mind starts. So she's already tired on her feet, she's already working whole day. So what color do you think her emotions are? Do you think she's in green? Do she's amber, or she's in red? How about amber? About orange. So she's coming there at orange. And as she walks up to the gap, she starts to think about the gallery. Is the gallery clean? Did he clean the gallery? And as she walks in, the gallery is not clean. What happens now? Red. She moves towards the red. She opens the door, and as she opens the door, the first thing she does is this. What's she looking for? The dishes. All of them are still there in the sink. Where she goes to? Red again, more red. And then she looks across there and she sees her husband sprawl off on the couch watching a TV. What happens to her? She explodes. She trips off. And she walks straight past into the bedroom and slams the door. And she sits down on the bed, heaving. And gradually, she brings herself back from extreme red, some people say scarlet, and she comes back down, and she comes back down, and she tries to say, well, okay, let me go and see what happened. And she opens the door, and she looks at him, and she said, what happened today? He said, well, today was a horrible day. I am fed up on my job. I can't take it. They're taking advantage of me. They're picking on me. And you know something? I'm feeling to fire it all. I am so depressed. I am feeling to just end the whole thing. And then she realized that in her anger, she never took chance to look and see what was happening to him. She was so preoccupied with her feelings of negativity and her red zone feelings and her own battles within herself that she has not had a time to look at him. And now, and she said, you know something, Hillary? We sat down together for the rest of the evening and we shared. We forgot all about those dishes. We forgot about the gallery because there were bigger things involved. And so often in life, and so often in a couple relationship, we are so preoccupied with our own internal struggles, our own internal issues, that we seldom have the time to look at the other person. So when we say that violence could happen on a spur of a moment, you know, sometimes we read on the papers and we see a very violent situation. And you say, but how could that happen? It didn't happen like that, you know. It happened gradually, moving from green zone to amber to red to scarlet until somebody has lost control. How do we do that? We have to be able to come back at peace in ourselves. So all non-violence, all peace starts internally. As we go through the day, one of the good things, we can sing. You know, a lot of people tell me now they have a little prayer on their cell phone. And when they start to feel that they're going off into the amber zone or into the red zone, they play a song, they sing a hymn, they take a time out, they say their prayers. But each one of us has to find within ourselves, what are the practices that can help me bring myself back? What are the practices that I can do in order to be able to make myself come back into the green zone? And therefore, as we leave here, when we leave here, I hope at the end of our talk, you will feel much more in the green zone. So, what we want to do is to really understand that all violence starts internally. All violence starts when we are not at peace with each other. And this lack of peace with ourselves manifests itself in emotions. And if we are not careful, these emotions manifest itself in behavior.
And I want to talk a little bit about how we recognize the signs of violence in a relationship. And as I go through the different areas, I want us to note how subtle, how very subtle violence can enter a relationship. And you know, in Trinidad, we talk a lot about heckling, about teasing, about you can't take a joke, and so. But I want us to remember that violence is not only physical, it is emotional and it is psychological. So the first thing I want to talk about, using harmful language. You know, relationships are built or destroyed one conversation at a time. They're built or destroyed one conversation at a time. And one of the things is name calling in relationships. We had a couple friend, and her love name for him was Uglito. Uglito. And you know, to live with someone who constantly tells you you're ugly is not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing. I don't need to finish the story and tell you that they're no longer together. But it happens, playing mind games, publicly humiliating each other. You know, we go out with each other and we put down each other publicly. You know, she can't do this, he can't do that. And, you know, ladies, and the audience has a lot of ladies here this evening. It's not only the men. A lot of psychological violence happens with us. We do it. We do it to them. Ill-speaking your spouse, talking down, putting them down in front of other people, laughing at your spouse. The subtle ways that violence can enter a relationship, using that harmful language, using social standing. It's a reality. And let's do it. Let's talk about it. Using your social standing. Pulling the race card. That's a real thing, you know? And we live in a society where the race card is a real thing. And we pull the race card on each other as well. Subtly talking about our social status. You know, I have a better job than you. I am the one, my circle of friends. And so, you know, you are. And we put down our spouses, very subtle. You don't know how grateful you should be for having me as your husband or having me as your wife, because look at this new circle of people that you are now associating with. That is violence. That is social, you know, that is putting down the other person. Your job, you know, I am the one bringing in the money here. So therefore, I am the one who will make all the decisions. I am the one who's in charge here, you know, and constantly putting down each other, constantly comparing ourselves with each other all the time. You constantly compare yourself with me. Well, you know, I did this, but you didn't. And your circles and using your social standing. That is psychological violence because you're putting down your partner. And one that's happening very often now, the other one, using technology. Breaking into your friends, your partners, your couple partner, social network profile. Putting little notes on your partner's social network profile. Going into their Facebook page, going into their private email, their WhatsApp, forcing someone. And a lot of this is happening. And we say, you just have to get with the program. That's normal. That's okay. But think about how it is affecting a relationship. Think about how it's affecting the trust in a relationship. And it's breaking down the trust. And relationships are built or destroyed one conversation at a time, one action at a time. And what we're doing when we're doing these things is we're constantly just eroding. We're constantly eroding that violence. And I can go on to be talking about using technology, things that are happening in our society right now, forcing someone to send, to look at explicit photos. It's happening. It's happening among our young people, and I dare say it's happening among our not so young people as well. So, looking at those types of violence, and it is violence. It is violence. It is where violence starts. Also, using intimidation. A well-known one, and you see it very much here, making someone afraid by the way you look at them. We talk about giving them the look. We give them the look, and it's one thing to say that we just give them the look and we laugh at it, but some looks can be frightening, and the look gives you a message of something deadly that can happen if you continue that conversation. Something even more deadly that can happen then. Your actions, your gestures, by smashing, by heavy-handed, by just scaring people. And so subtly things. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about couple relationships, and we're talking about our children looking on and learning behavior. A lot of times in Hilary and I, when we do counseling of couples, you hear these little things happening. And the partner starts to minimize it. The spouse or the partner starts to minimize that. That's what you get vexed for, That's upset you. And looking at us like, she see how stupid she is. Look at this stupid little thing. But what they're doing is they're ignoring the feelings of the person. This is hurting me. I am feeling hurt about this. This has affected me. And the partner is not seeing it. So minimizing the impact of abuse. Minimizing the impact. I feel abused when you do that. I feel abused when you look at me like that. I feel abused when you take away my cell phone from me, and or you take away my car keys from me. I feel abused when you do that. And the partner is saying, well, you deserve that. You deserve that. You ask for it. Yeah, you ask for that. And, making people afraid by your looks, making them afraid by your threats, and then, we say you look for that. And then the next morning we say, something, yesterday I was so stressed. I'm so sorry I did that, but I was so stressed yesterday, and you pushed me. You saw I came home from work tired. You saw that, and you pushed me. So you caused your own abuse. You caused that to happen to you, And we blame the abuse on stress. We blame the abuse on alcohol. I had 2 drinks in. Oh gosh, forgive your boy, forgive your girl, And we do it, and we say it, and we expect our partner to just say, well, okay, next time. And then the classic one that happens so much in Trinidad, jealousy. Jealousy. You know, you push me to do that. You didn't see. And jealousy is real. Jealousy is real. And it happens, a lot of us females as well. You know, it happens. We do things and we blame it on jealousy. We tell our friends, you know, well, you know, I saw him, whatever, whatever. And we say the victim. In other words, what we do is we say the victim caused the abuse. You know, you look for that. And you know something, if you're abused long enough, and if you are subject to this violence long enough, you start believing that you deserve the violence because you've been told it so often. So some of the other things, using threats and making threats at the person, you never actually do it, but you threaten them. You threaten them to do it, that you're going to be violent and so. And of course, there's exclusion, the classic exclusion. And you control your partner, where she goes, what she does, who she hangs out with, who he limes with, what times, and so. And I'm not saying that these things are all violence, but you know when you've taken it to the ultimate level and when it becomes violence. And then, of course, there is the physical violence that can happen. And physical violence sometimes starts very, very subtle. You know, the subtle scratching, women, our nails, the subtle scratching, the subtle hitting, slapping, the subtle hitting, and you push and you push and you push, and one day you just push too far and you make the front page of the Express or one of the local newspapers. So when we talk about recognizing violence and recognizing, because you know something, it's in all of us. It's in all of us. And I'm sure when I went through this list, all of us could identify with some level of violence that we are guilty of. And as Hilary said earlier, you know, you have to accept what's going on in yourself. You have to accept when you're in the red zone. And sometimes it happens. And very, very, very subtly, we begin the story of violence. So it is not only physical, it is emotional, it is psychological.
So, some of you may know that Sandy went across to Canada on a holiday for 2 weeks, recently without me. And she needed a break from all the violence. So she came back and she told me, she said, you know something, Trinidad is real third world. You are real third world. I said, what? She said, when you see my sister's husband comes, he's always so attentive to my sister. He's there right by her side.
You didn't tell me we were going to share this.
You know, when I ask you for a glass of wine, you fill the glass of wine full, so that I will never ask you to fill back the glass. But when he pours a little bit, and he stands up and he waits, and he pours a little bit again. That's the proper way. You're too third world. So since then, I started to realize, well, you know, probably she's right. And I'm starting to examine my behavior, because I said all violence starts internally. And then this thing happened, which proved that she was very right. The other day, both of us, well, our office, we sit both in the office and we face each other. And I'm doing my work, and she's doing her work. And then she says, oh my gosh, I have a bad gas pain, and it's hurting me right in the back here. And I was just busy, and I said, well, when you're making a cup of tea, make one for myself as well. Well, so that was third world. I proved that I'm really in third world. So, so I want to just to reiterate that we are all violent. That violence is not something that we are either violent or non-violent. We are all degrees of violent. What we have to do is that, are we moving towards being less violent, or are we moving towards being more violent? That's the critical thing. I know I'm third world now, but I'm trying to move towards first world. And that's the important thing. The ultimate test, though, of violence is really when you can respond to violence with non-violence. Now, that's harder, because all the time, all we'll be talking about is either you do violence or I do violence. But how do you respond to violence is the critical factor to know whether you're first world or third world. There are a number of ways to respond to violence, especially within couples. The first way is that you can accept the violence. Now, that's not a good way, but this happens a lot. There are a lot of people who may be unempowered, and therefore one party is carrying on a lot of violence, but the person just accepts it. They're so disempowered that they do not know how to respond, so they accept the violence. And what happens for that is that the violence escalates. It goes on and it gets worse. So accepting the violence is not a good response to violence. Another way is to ignore the violence. You're not accepting it, but you pretend it didn't happen. So, like Sandy really did get up and make the cup of tea. So you ignore it. She responded to my violence with non-violence. So therefore, you could ignore it. You could retaliate. But all of them, whether or not you're accepting it, you're ignoring it, or retaliating, all of them just leads to more violence. Ideally, for you to respond to violence, you must respond to violence with creative, active non-violence. Now, Sister must have told you about that. So I have a couple of tools, just to give you, I don't know if Sister gave you, but a couple of tools just for you to remember. One of them is from each side. So we're going to talk about one, which is called cara. Cara, those of you who know Spanish, C-A-R-A means face, and it's face to face. So that if it is that one partner is carrying out a violent act on a regular basis, you say we have to have a face-to-face talk. And therefore you practice cara. C, the first C. C is for centering yourself. So that you don't go in, remember what I said, that all violence is internal. So you don't go into one of these meetings, these face-to-face meetings, when you are already agitated. You calm yourself, you center yourself, you take a little meditation, you calm yourself. Then A, when you meet with the other person, you articulate your situation. You have to be brave enough to tell the person, you see this way you are behaving, this way you put me down in public, this way you ignore me when you're amongst your friends, this way you say things that insult me subtly, I am not going to accept that. So therefore you articulate your situation. I have had enough and I'm not going to accept it. So that's the A, articulating. R, you receive the other person's truth so that you listen. You receive their truth. And you may say, well, I really was not aware that I was doing that. Sometimes in the cocktail party, I get so carried away. I was not aware that I was insulting you. I was not aware that I was ignoring you. I was not aware that I just move off and leave you alone with your glass empty and you have not refilled my glass, or you fill up the glass and then I don't have to ask you. So, and then the final A is you make an agreement. Let's see how we will respond in future. So both an agreement is an agreement. The next time we have a party, I will not ignore you. The next time we go out to a cocktail party, the next time we are amongst friends, I will not ignore you. And if I do ignore you, you throw a tantrum. So you make an agreement. So that's one side when the person is hurting and you are hurting and therefore you want to reach out. On the other side, if you notice your partner is hurting, I have another little trick. It's called bathe, B-A-T-H-E. So B is you see your partner, not herself or not himself. B is you try to find out what's going on. What's the background? What's bothering you, darling? Why are you walking? Why are you not making tea for me? Why are you walking angrily and your mouth is in that way? So you're trying to, what is bothering you? And then you listen to the person. They tell you what is affecting them. You listen to them. And you say, okay, that is A. What is affecting you? You say, but what is it T is troubling you? What is the specific thing that is troubling you? You say, well, when you speak to me like that at the end of the day, it makes me feel belittled. It makes me feel less than a person. And therefore, I feel hurt. And then you say, well, okay, I listen to you, I hear you, I am going to make a change, how I'm going to handle this, I'm going to do something, and I'm going to try to change my behavior. And finally, E, and I want to tell you, now that you've told me that, I empathize. I could understand, because what you're telling me, I remember once when I was ignored, when you were amongst your friends, and you were liming with your friends, and you ignored me. And I felt very hurt, and I know what it feels like. So in future, I will not ignore you when next year in a party or together.
Thank you. So, just before I'm listening to Hillary talking, and we're talking about nonviolence, and it can happen at any stage in a relationship. I remember 2 incidents. Once we were doing a marriage encounter weekend, so we were taking this elderly couple up to the weekend, and they were in like their 60s and very, very, and they were been married, they have children, they have grandchildren, and we were like in our 20s then. So for us, they were like people that we look up to, and we were taking them, we were driving them up. And we started telling them, well, it's so lovely that you all are going there to renew, and it's so lovely that you want to spend a weekend together. And when we got there, as the wife was coming out of the car, she told me, she said, if this does not work, I am gone. I have had enough of this. And, it just tells that they've lived an entire, this poor lady lived her entire life wanting more for her relationship and wanting more for her life and trying up to that age that she was trying. And, it was really, I was shocked to hear that. And then another incident happened when a very dear friend of mine, her husband died. And he was another elderly couple, and when he died, and I met her in the grocery one day, and I held her, and I said, I am so sorry, and I hugged her and accepted her, and she said, and then she pulled me aside, and she said, I am so glad he did. And it just goes to show that sometimes we live in so much pain. We live in such, and there was no physical violence happening there. There was no papers to be made. Nobody heard noises and slamming people against doors in the house. But the relationship that they were having, obviously, there was no fulfillment. It was not a relationship that brought them together. So, we have to be aware as people who are we are the cradle of society, we are the families, we are the couples, we are bringing up the children, and we have to be that sign for them. We have to start practicing active nonviolence. And first of all, remember, when we practice active nonviolence, first of all, people may ignore us and they may talk. And then, as Mahatma Gandhi said, first they ignore us, and then they put us down. But then we win. We win. So we want to thank you for affording us this opportunity to share this time with you. Thank you very much.
I just want to tell the men that another sign of a first world man is that he holds the bags outside of the store and he waits until she comes out with whatever it is. He doesn't drift off and go somewhere else. First world.